Fatile no la rona, Kimpo ya mutimo, Kibuswa jwa borra, Etu aleneka kariso, Tuhang bana, Tuhang Basadi emang tlhagafala re kopane le go direla lefatshe la rona ina le ntlela tumo la tšhaba ya Botswana ka kutlwano le kagisanyo e bopagantswe mmogo tsogang bana tsogang emang basadi emang tlhagafalang re kopane le go direla lefatshe la rona tsogang bana tsogang emang basadi emang tlhagafalang re kopaneng le go direla lefatshe la rona pula.
Amen. Wow. You may be seated. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a good morning to you all. A good morning to you all. Thank you. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please accord me this opportunity to kindly invite to the podium for the formal introductions and the welcome remarks and acknowledgement of protocol salutations this morning. It is my pleasure once more to invite our Chief Executive and the AADFI Chairman, Re Thabo Thamani.
Good morning. Bonjour. Ça va bien? Minister Honor Naloyanari Ravona. Director of Ceremonies, Re Marapedi, aka Dignesh Stopa. Minister of Entrepreneurship, Honorable Karabo Khare, Gapele mo Parlamente yo tlhophilweng ke batho ba Moshopa Manyana constituency. Matona otlhe a leng ha mme mmake ba lemoge ke lemoge Acting Minister of Trade and Industry, Honorable Beauty Manake, the one that I've been exchanging French with. Ke lemoge Mothusa Tona Re Modukanele, ke lemoge Mothusa Tona Re Pule, ke lemoge Mothusa Tona le latisitswe Setlomo, mme mmake lemoge gape modulasetilo wa khuduthamaga ya bode Dr. Alfred Seboeng, mmake lemoge gape baemedi ba mahatsha a sele, the High Commissioner of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to Botswana, and also the High Commissioner of the Republic of South Africa to Botswana. Magape ke lemoge thata His Worship, the Mayor of the city of Gaborone, Re Austin Abraham, thank you for coming. Ma ke lemoge bakwaledi ba senela ruri ba makalana harologaneng a goromente ba ba leng ha, all permanent secretaries that are here. I would also want to recognize all the board members of the Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency. Let me also recognize the board of directors of the Association of African Development Finance Institution, which I also chair as a Botswana, all the way from Botswana, all the way from Kanye. Thank you. Let me also recognize Mr. Remy Roux, the chairman of Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency. I'm delighted to have you in my beautiful country. Botswana is known for its great hospitality, incredible wildlife, and exciting adventures, and we promise you an exceptionally hospitable experience. I want to especially thank you, the Honorable Minister of Entrepreneurship of the Republic of Botswana, Mr. Gaborone, for gracing this event. Yesterday, you received the Aadfi Board of Directors, together with Honorable Manake, who paid you a courtesy advocacy visit, and you are here with us today. Your availability, despite your busy schedule, attests to the government of Botswana's commitment to supporting efforts at achieving sustainable development and the recognition of the critical role of development finance institutions in achieving the SDGs. CEDA as a DFI in Botswana has benefited immensely from the government's support in promoting its mandate, and we thank the government for this. I also recognize the African Development Bank, AFDB, for its partnership with Aadfi. So the Association of African DFIs was conceived in 1975 under the auspices of the African Development Bank. It's an 80-strong member institution of all DFIs in Africa. And its main role, amongst others, is to maintain and create a lasting impact in developing the African economy. The president of the African Development Bank is ably represented by Mr. David, the Chief Financial Strategy Officer of the bank. As I indicated, I'm also thankful to Mr. Pitten, the Managing Director of Bank of Industry Namibia, for his bank's support in organizing this occasion. Just to show you how connected we are with our African brothers. Just yesterday, they came and said, yeah, no, we see this is a beautiful country, we'll give you another extra 10,000 US dollars. Just like that. So, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, on September the 25th, 2015, the global community signed the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. With less than a decade to go, with less than a decade to the SDGs target of 2030, will it be justifiable to assume that Africa is on the right path as a continent to achieving the SDGs? You will agree that responding to the question requires deep and frank introspection. Director of Ceremony, this is the first CEO forum the association has held since the outbreak of Corona, which literally paused our business activities. The COVID pandemic set the clock back in our effort to achieve the SDGs, together with Resource Mobilization. And as we are emerging from the impact of the pandemic, the global economies got entangled with another crisis, the Russian-Ukraine war. As a result, goods inflation in our countries is skyrocketing, and the climate change exacerbates Africa's food crisis. We face numerous development challenges as a continent, both internally and externally. And this is where DFIs come in. We need patient capital to develop our economies. As Honorable Minister Manake normally says, let us fund the value chain, the entire value chain. Achieving some of the key components of the 2030 Agenda, focusing on green and quality infrastructure, health and social protection, climate adaptation and resilience, and human rights and equalities is challenging in Africa. The International Finance Corporation, IFC, estimated that over the next decade, 25 billion US dollars in new investments will be needed to meet Africa's healthcare demand. In terms of green and quality infrastructure, inadequate infrastructure remains a major impediment to Africa's full economic growth potential. So we need a lot of money channeled towards development finance institutions. A lot of money. And we can only get that if we come together as DFIs through the multilateral banks that are bigger than other smaller DFIs to lend them money and affordable funding. Ladies and gentlemen, these challenges are compounded by the current social economic crisis in most countries, which require counter-cyclical intervention. Thus, our gathering today defines a new course in engaging and contributing to innovative ideas that will chart a sustainable path for African DFIs in mobilizing genuine resources for our country's development. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to posit a few areas that we should work on going forward. These include regional and continental partnership with relevant stakeholders in the intertrade industry, e.g. Afrexim Bank. They were here recently, and we know what they committed to this country. Development of export credit and guarantee facilities to develop productive capacity throughout the continent in order to catalyze economic growth. Development of patient capital from multilateral banks and DFIs that take into account the peculiarities of SMEs and their needs. Hedge against currency risks, local currency denomination of loans. Delays occasioned by cross-border and logistical challenges. Financing products should therefore take into consideration these changes, which include longer repayment periods, lower interest rates, and the development of appropriate business development services, advisory services. Bagazo, I am here to welcome you to this wonderful country. And as I normally say, Chairman and Minister, I want our visitors, please don't go back with your money. You must spend it here. In whatever form, we need those US dollars to remain here. That is FDI that we are talking about. And once more, don't forget that we have the best beef. It's not negotiable. We have real elephants, we have real lions, proper ones, that you will see in the Delta. And as I move around the country, Minister, I always tell them that imagine in the Delta, you are taking a shower and a lion is just passing through. Just imagine. You can only imagine wherever you are. But here, it's not an imagination, it's reality. So please, find time to visit the Okavango. We'll take you there. With those few words, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the Republic of Botswana and to Gaborone, the beautiful city of this country. Let me thank you for the courtesy of your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Chair. And I must say, I'm actually quite delighted that in your opening remarks, you did actually allude to the fact that there will be certain discussions around a conflict in certain parts of Europe that I think we're all familiar with, but more specifically, the pandemic. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who will be with us during the course of the day, those are some of the issues that our panelists are going to essentially touch on and unpack. I don't think we want to be in a comfortable position of taking a shower in the presence of lions, but I'll leave that to your imagination. Whilst you're in the process of spending your money here, I'm referring specifically to our guests. Lest you are imagining taking a shower in the presence of lions. I can almost imagine my brothers from Nigeria taking a shower in the presence of lions. It will be a delight on the part of the lion to see you taking a shower. Oh, Ghana. Probably the lion will be looking at you and say, look at you. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity, though this presentation shall be virtual, to once again invite the representative of the African Development Bank, Mr. David Tashabo, who will also going to, just as well as the chairman did, indeed take us through this rather important occasion. The same shall be followed by an address from the African Development Bank, rather from the General of Finance and Common Summit, who will be also presenting virtually, Mr. Madama Mariko. I'm saying this deliberately so that when the first speaker is done, there shall be a follow-up. So do not be perplexed as when that happens as to why we're having that transition. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, please show your love and welcome to Mr. David Ashiabo.
Thank you very much, Director of Ceremonies. Honorable Ministers, Mr. Tabu Tamani, the Chair of Aadfi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be invited to address the Aadfi's annual CEO Forum. Let me begin by apologizing for not being able to join you physically. I had every intention of traveling to Gaborone, but unfortunately I had a family emergency, which meant that I could not travel. So I bring you greetings from Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the President of the African Development Bank, Mr. Solomon Queno, our Vice President for Private Sector Industrialization and Infrastructure, as well as Mr. Stefan Naletembi, our Director of the Finance Department. All know the African Development Bank has long-standing association, development finance institutions. Erin did mention that were behind the founding of Aadfi, and that is because we believe that there is a strong complementarity between MDBs like ourselves, the African Development Bank, and national and regional DFIs that make up the membership of Aadfi. We as an MDB have a certain financial muscle. We have the AAA rating, obviously, which we're able to leverage to mobilize funding, which we can direct to smaller projects, leveraging the regional and national development banks. You will also know that we are founding shareholders of many African DFIs, both at the regional and national levels. And that is because we believe, as I said, that there's a natural complementarity of our roles. This meeting sort of takes place in a very interesting context. I say interesting context because as you've heard and as you will hear, a lot has happened in the last 2 years. There's 2 or 3 years. There's been the COVID pandemic. There's been or there still is the Ukraine crisis, the finance in common movement, which Adama will speak to, was also started or founded. There's also been much more recently COP27, which ended, I think, a few days ago. And I think that puts a very interesting context around this week's meeting. Why? Because it calls into question what we are doing as African DFIs and what more we can do. We at the African Development Bank have always believed that African DFIs are critical to Africa achieving the SDGs. And that is why we believe in working with African DFIs, A, to help them fulfill their mission, and B, to help make them stronger. And I think the one lesson that we have taken from this crisis is that actually for Africa to grow sustainably within the context of the green agenda, but also to have sort of sustained economic growth, we really need to look more to mobilizing our domestic resources. And I know that when we talk about domestic resource mobilization, a lot of people focus on the tax angle. Where we believe we should pay more attention to is the role of African DFIs in building resilient and solid domestic financial systems that can mobilize domestic resources and channel them to the real economy to support all the investments that we need in quality infrastructure, quality healthcare, education, manufacturing, agriculture, and all those areas that we need to grow sustainably. So we were very happy to see that the theme for these 2 days is around resource mobilization, and the challenge that I want to leave with you, in addition to the challenges that your chairman has laid out, is think broadly. I want to challenge you as African DFIs to think of your roles beyond being a channel for resources for MDBs. Think, for example, as a leading DFI in my country or my region, beyond mobilizing and channeling resources from the community or from MDBs, which I think, if there's one thing we know from the past 2 years, is that we can't depend on those resources alone, right? They are not sufficient to fund our needs. So as national and regional DFIs, what role can we play to support the development of domestic financial systems, which in the long term are the only ones that can provide the local currency funding that we need in the long term to support the quality growth we want to see on the continent. We at the African Development Bank are really keen and happy to hear from you, both as Aadfi and as member institutions. How can we support you better? We have a number of new initiatives in the planning that we will be coming to talk to Aadfi and your membership about in the near future. One of them is the African Financial Alliance on Climate Change, which really aims to bring together the African financial sector to do a number of things. First of all, advocacy, learning, knowledge management, sharing around climate change, not only from an opportunity, not only from a risk perspective, but also from an opportunities perspective. What are the opportunities offered by climate adaptation? What help does the African financial sector need to be able to take advantage of those opportunities to support the green and inclusive growth that we want and so much need on our continent? But I think one of the most important things that we want to do with with AFAC, is to mobilize the African financial sector so that it can have a voice in the global discussions on climate finance and climate and climate change. The danger is that if we do not mobilize the African financial sector to have a voice in those discussions, we will end up being rule takers, where the rules for the for climate finance, for who is able to access green finance, etc., being set elsewhere and without inputs from the African financial sector, and we find ourselves excluded. So we will be coming back to Aadfi and your membership on AFAC in the coming weeks. We are also looking at designing what we call the African Financial Sector Corporate Governance Initiative, ACG, and ACG really aims to do what its name says. It aims to help the African financial sector improve governance so that they can leverage more funding either from MDBs like ourselves or from domestic capital markets. Of course, this is we are very much in the preliminary stages of designing that initiative. So again, we'll be coming back to you with to consult on that. Having said all that, I think let me end here. Let me apologize again for for having to do this virtually. I would much rather have been in Gaborone, believe me, but unfortunately, yeah, that was something I couldn't. Let me end here. Let me wish you well on behalf of myself and my hierarchy, my senior management. We look forward to hearing the conclusions of this CEO forum, and we look forward to working together both to strengthen the national your membership, the national and regional DFIs, but also to strengthen our relationship with Aadfi. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aishobo. Now, ladies and gentlemen, once again presenting virtually from the Secretariat of the Finance and Common Summit, Mr. Adama Mariko.
How do you hear me? Thank you very much. I'm not sure you are all hearing me, but I guess you are. So thank you very much. And I'm going to start to thank Minister of Entrepreneurship of the Republic of Botswana, Honorable Karabo Gare, other ministers present, ambassadors, and members of the diplomatic corps present, my friend and dear Chairman, Mr. Chair Thabo Tabane of Aadfi. So, Excellencies, Ministers, dear colleagues, I'm really pleased to share Mr. Remiyu's friendly and respectful salutations and his congratulations as well for this major event today in Africa. I'm Adama Mariko. I'm Secretary General of Financing Common, and also I happen to be the Deputy Executive Director for AFD Group for Mobilization, Partnership, and Communication. So it's really a great pleasure to have the chance today to share progress and views on how public development banks, be them national, regional, or sub-regional, can support financing of the low carbon and resilient economies, especially in Africa. The third edition of the Financing Common Summit, which took place in Abidjan, in Africa for the first time 1 month ago, gathered more than 500 banks across the world through also the regional networks. So we aimed to contribute to top priority discussions that were held in the COP27 in Africa and also in the G20 summit, including climate and adaptation finance, social investment, and just an energy transition partnerships. My first message to you is that the public development banks have the potential to mobilize climate finance at scale while supporting just energy, just and equitable transitions. On that occasion, we have highlighted several things. The first one is that the International Development Finance Club, which also includes 6 African public development banks, has disclosed its climate finance numbers. $224 billion of green finance have been made available by public development banks in 2021. That is a raise of 20% compared to 2022. Put together with the $81 billion of climate finance delivered by multilateral development banks, it represents more than 300 billions delivered by members of Financing Common coalitions. This is a record-breaking number, but only the surface of what we could achieve. Today, climate finance accounts for an average of 20% of total commitments made by IDFC members. If all public development banks of the fixed coalition were to commit to a similar ratio, this would make 500 billion of US dollars of climate finance every year. And we can mobilize much more through private sector, of course. But in order to succeed on the climate agenda, we also need to be sure that the transitions are just and equitable. For this reason, the Just Energy Transition Partnership for South Africa, for example, is a living proof of how local, national, and international development banks can be an instrument in supporting the ambitions of this transition from the government. Only in 1 year, such a partnership. Also, I'm pleased that international development banks such as IFD have signed their first commitments. For example, we signed 300 million in a fellowship of public development bank support as well. to contribute to this pathway. My second message is that accelerating green investment and social investment in African countries must become a priority. Today, African countries face a triple injustice. While they only represent 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, they are at the forefront of the direct impacts on climate change. And they only receive about 5% of finance in the world. But what the Financing Common Initiative showed us in Abidjan is the potential of African public development banks gathered in Aadfi as well. Public development banks are delivering on two critical topics. The one is adaptation. The specific report we have published during the Financing Common Summit showed that we could have the raise of the financing of adaptation in Africa. But also, we have seen a new partnership between the Global Center of Adaptation and Invesco, one of the largest investment funds, demonstrating the capacity to mobilize private sector capital for adaptation as well. On energy transition, public development banks can be a powerful solution providers as well. DBSA, for example, in South Africa, is playing a key role implementing the Southern African just energy transition. Some holds true as well for BRG in Rwanda, involved in the ambitious announcement by Rwanda's Sustainable Finance Roadmap as well. So we have also example in the Northern African countries, in the West African countries as well in this pathway. So our contribution as fellow PDBs should be constant in this discussion to bring these issues among ourselves and to see how we can involve the work of the public development banks, experience, the expertise with the governments they serve. My third message and last one is that a new international financial architecture is necessary to maximize our chances to deliver on the Paris Agreement, but also on the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the future of global framework on biodiversity as well. As Africa is having the most beautiful, I mean, I have heard lions and all those animals we have somehow, but also our forests we have to protect, and our seas surrounding us. So Africa concentrates 20% of the public development banks worldwide, but they are usually small and micro institutions, accounting for about 1% of the total asset of all the public development banks in the world. So how we can see this is that, are we big enough to serve our big challenges? Also, how I personally see it is it's an opportunity to keep growing and serve as public development banks the way to leverage also the Africa challenges and to bring finance also on SDGs. These African public development banks are adaptable, resourceful, and largely countercyclical in their response to the crisis, as demonstrated during the COVID-19, and they keep building on their complementaries through their existing networks. They can also be particularly effective in delivering their mandates when they have independent and suitable regulatory framework in place. So Financing Common is not just a pro domo aspects. We are not just showing public development banks more beautiful than they are, but in fact, it's the way where we use research to document and to see the real impact the public development banks had in Africa during this COVID-19 and the quick response they have made. So that's something we should congratulate ourselves for. This is the reason why I firmly believe that we need to shape a new international finance architecture as well. At FIX in Abidjan, we held the first dialogue between the three components of the international finance system: the public development banks behind this Financing Common movement, but also the private sector behind the G funds, the Global Financial Alliance for Net Zero, and the regulators behind the Network for Greening the Financial System, NGFS. We now need to strengthen this dialogue at the local level, at the regional level. This dialogue have to be, the heart of how we can align finance and align the interest between those three pillars of the international finance. So we have also to walk the talk on the commitments we have taken, any of us, in our different networks. We have also, it was a strong call we have made in Abidjan to support the regionalizing of special drawing rights to MDBs, especially for African issues as well, in order to fund the national and regional banks and bridge sustainable finance, the gap we have at the last mile level. So we have also to increase the public development bank's capital base and financial capabilities at scale, including through consensual finance and greater use of blending finance products. That's what we try to do in AFD, for instance. And grant them the access to key multilateral public funds if proper standards and procedures are satisfied by those public development banks. So let me stop here just to thank you again for this opportunity, to wish you pleasant work through this day, and to see you around for other events and other gathering. I would be pleased to attend with you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mariko. Ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of time, it is once again my singular honor and pleasure to invite to the podium the Right Honorable Minister of Entrepreneurship and Member of Parliament for Mushupa Manyana, the Right Honorable Harisokra D.
Thank you very much. You may be seated. Director of Ceremonies, Remora Pedi, my dear colleagues, honorable ministers, acting Minister of Trade and Industry, Memmanage, acting Minister of Lands, Rema Busepule, acting Minister of Tourism, Remo Ducanele, and Assistant Minister, Rele Latisitwe. Your Excellencies, your High Commissioner of Nigeria and South Africa, Your Worship, the Mayor of the City of Gaborone, Re Austin Abram, all permanent secretaries here present, Chairman of the CEDA Board, Dr. Alfred Tsebweng, and board members here present, Chairman of the Association of African Development Finance Institutions, Reta Botamani, Executive Committee, members of the Association of African Development Finance Institutions here present, distinguished guests, good morning. It is indeed a great pleasure for me to perform the official opening of the Chief Executive Officers Forum of the Association of African Development Finance Institutions, which is hosted by Citizen Entrepreneurial Development Agency, or CEDA, together with the Bank of Industry of Nigeria. Chairman Honore, they have put in an amount of in excess of 700,000 Buddha, right? And I was wondering, how much is that in dollars? And how much is that in Naira? And when you convert to Naira, it gives you about 25 million Naira. So that is the amount of money you are chopping here today. Indeed, the two organizations have demonstrated how we can leverage on friendship and partnership between nations for greater good of our people. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of the year's conference is Building Partnerships for Resource Mobilization and Financing SDGs in Africa. Over the past 3 years, governments across the world had to readjust their priorities as well dealt with the effects and impact of COVID-19, both to human life and economic prosperity. The role of DFIs during this tough period is to support government through counter-cyclical measures, including funding of COVID-19 related projects. However, the increasingly limited resources from governments, with increasingly limited resources from government, DFIs are now expected to mobilize resources to meet the fiscal gaps and continue to meet their developmental mandate across the various affected sectors of the economy. It is therefore imperative that DFIs, which are already threatened by shift in the demographics, societal needs, economic and market conditions, as well as political, legal, and regulatory regimes, reposition themselves to raise the necessary resources to assist governments. The theme, therefore, challenges DFIs to tackle the how by redefining their objectives, building better linkages, optimizing systems, improving efficiency in operations, and accelerating progress, and most importantly, aligning and accelerating our goals towards meeting SDG goals. It therefore further emphasizes the role of DFIs as a vehicle in driving global economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, as the focus shifts from relying entirely on governments to raise capital, the DFIs have a reason to exist. And the CEOs here present have the responsibility to advise governments on how to best serve people, especially as they feel marginalized by commercial markets. The partnerships you form will be crucial, and at the forefront of this discussion should be how best to serve our people. As you all know, one of the fundamental principles in setting up DFIs was to address prevailing market failures and reach unserved segments. The main reason being that private entities maximize profit and have a low or no interest in offering services to low-income individuals in remote communities, or more general in financing high-risk projects with positive social externalities. Due to the associated burden on assisting MMEs, which include lack of collateral, the cost of administering and monitoring laws, and substantial default rates, the DFIs have been instituted to close the gap and finance this important sector of the economy. Notwithstanding the important role played by the DFIs, there is need to debate on how DFIs can assist governments. There is evidence that DFIs have an important role to play in the development of our economies. DFIs are now generally expected to address broader developmental policy objectives, including employment creation, income distribution, import substitution, and developing new industrial sectors or boosting weak ones. Based on the above, it is clear that the role of DFIs in developing countries have gone beyond addressing market failures, but more broadly into addressing developmental failures. This challenges you to reconsider countries' financial systems and regulatory regimes and comply with international best practices in good corporate governance and risk management. As part of your strategies, there's a need to balance conflicting responsibilities of remaining financially stable while fulfilling your policy mandate. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, most DFI's growth and success have been positive, and it has been through the injections from the government from the governments that own the DFIs. But the DFI model has also proven that it can be financially sustainable. The DFIs generally achieve modest but steady profits that allow them to grow year after year while raising additional funding for their investment in the markets. On their own investment, DFIs have already played a crucial role by mobilizing private investors. They typically do this by providing risk capital to enterprises that can then in turn raise additional funding from commercial financiers. It is through this arrangement that countries like Botswana strive towards the goal of nurturing private-public partnerships to mobilize private investors by identifying investment opportunities and preparing transactions and structures that are ready for private investors to participate in. The right mix of finance, therefore, includes risk capital backed by manpower, experience, and long-term perspective. These ingredients can never be replaced by sophisticated financial structuring on its own, particularly in the development finance that is used to achieve development outcomes. The DFI models aims to contribute to these outcomes by investing in projects with good commercial sustainability that live up to the standards for environmental and social responsibility. The challenges for DFI today is to go further than private investors in two respects: by investing in enterprises that involve too high commercial risks to be financed solely by the private, while mobilizing more private co-financing. The real challenge is to get the right mix of financing that supports the first hard steps taken by entrepreneurs, as well as the last dollar needed to reach financial close. Ladies and gentlemen, as you deliberate today, do so by the understanding that governments around the African continent are looking upon you, the leadership of DFIs, to raise or to mobilize resources to enable your respective countries to meet the SDGs. However, it is not enough to mobilize resources, but equally important is development impact for these resources. Therefore, it is important that these resources contribute to the intended outcomes, and contribute to development effectiveness. Director of Ceremonies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is now my singular honor and privilege to declare the 2022 Chief Executive Officers Forum of the Association of African Development Finance Institutions officially open. Let's chop the money. Thank you, Director of Ceremonies.
You're probably going to have to stand again, but anyway. Well done, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much. Very insightful. Keep it tidy. You're getting there. I like that. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, as a token of appreciation from the association, Honorable Minister, once again, sir, if you can just kindly come to the podium to indulge us as we accord you this wonderful gesture. And our chair and CEO, if you can equally do the honors, chair, all of. Yes, they know. There's chair and there's chair. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Minister. This is a token of appreciation from all the African leaders that are here. And on behalf of the association, on behalf of all the African brothers and sisters, we give you this as a token of appreciation for gracing our event. Thank you very much. Another chairman, sending another chairman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Wait. Right. Once again, Honorable, please, sir, I humbly request that you return to the stage once again. Ladies and gentlemen, that essentially brings to an end the official segment of this morning in terms of our deliberations, when the Honorable Minister officially declared this forum open. But having said that, it'll be remiss of me if we do not cement it as a pinnacle of your wonderful submission, sir. If I could kindly invite our executives from the AADFI here present to join us for a photo opportunity. Jay, if you can please summon them, because you know who they are. I see everyone here who's deserving of a photo opportunity.
From Uganda, Kampala, someone from Nigeria, from Kenya, and Cyril based in Cote d'Ivoire. But don't worry about that.
Right. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and thank you once more. Thank you to our leadership here present, our executive, being our ministers and senior government officials, and of course yourselves, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. We will take a quick recess for a coffee break, at which time we will then come back. But of course, you'll be alerted momentarily where we'll now proceed with the plenary sessions. Of course, I will moderate those proceedings as we invite to the panel, our panelists and moderators. So once again, thank you very much for joining us this morning. For those of you who will then, of course, revert to your respective offices to carry about your normal indulgences. But for those of you remaining, once again, ladies and gentlemen, I shall instruct you accordingly as to what time we will then once again converge where we find ourselves currently. Once again, thank you very much. We may go and have tea and other condiments that accompany them. Chair, leaders.
These are the proud sponsors of the Association of African Development and Finance Institutions 2022 CEO Forum. CEDA, Finance, Develop, Sustain. These are the proud sponsors of the Association of African Development and Finance Institutions 2022 CEO Forum. CEDA, Finance, Develop, Sustain. These are the proud sponsors of the Association of African Development and Finance Institutions 2022 CEO Forum.